What's up, guys, and welcome, Daily Theologians. Is evolution blind faith? Is something like the eyeball possible that it could make itself in a universe where we see entropy and things running down? Are things actually getting better? You're not going to want to miss this as Ray Comfort jumps in to the fray. Check this out. So it's often said by people, and rightfully so, that sometimes we don't understand the position. Sometimes you're talking to someone and they say, well, that's not actually my position. So we want to make sure we get the position we're critiquing correct. And in this clip, Ray Comfort asks people, how did the eye make itself?
First eye evolved.
Yeah, eye is very intricate. It's got 137 million light-sensitive cells. Focusing muscles move an estimated 100,000 times a day. Unspeakably complex. How did the first eye evolve? What happened? What caused it?
I actually don't have an answer to that.
Now, tell me about this eye. It was just cells and then it decided it wanted to see? How long did this take?
Over millions of years, probably.
So was it an animal or was just an eye lying there, sort of a pre-eye?
Well, I would think that a cell, right, came together to form more cells, and that came a little microorganism, right? Then that had incentive to live, so it developed things to help it live over millions and millions of years.
Can it see yet?
No.
How did it eat?
By absorbing like little other things.
Did it have a brain?
No.
How did it think?
I think it's just did whatever it did, you know?
Did the brain evolve over years along with the eye that's evolving?
I wouldn't think the brain evolved until it actually evolved over millions of years, kind of into this animal. Well, it takes like eons at this point now.
Can it see yet?
Probably not.
Because you need the whole eye to be fully evolved to see, don't you? Half an eye doesn't really work.
Right, in the sense that maybe
Could it smell the food?
it just senses it, like
Where did the food come from?
food come from?
When did the eye begin to see?
Probably millions of years later.
No, it was just there on top of an antenna.
So it was just on top of an antenna. So you can see here the progression. Could it see? Could it think? Why did it have two eyes? Did it have lungs? These are things that you have irreducible complexity. And this is the appearance of information. An atheist would have to say, no, it's not actual information. It's just the appearance of information.
Qubit a gazillion times, and that's where we are. And then suddenly, bam! A universe appears, an entire universe.
There was nothing, then bam! The entire universe appears without a fairy godmother. It just happened. A miracle took place. Nothing created everything.
Within the first second, energy itself shatters into distinct forces, including electromagnetism and gravity. And energy does something else quite magical. What are the Goldilocks conditions? Well, first, you need energy. Now, where do you find such Goldilocks conditions?
Where do you find Goldilocks conditions? Nowhere. They're non-existent. There's no pocket, no lucky card, and no Goldilocks. Everything is corrupting. Nothing is getting better. Science tells us that, and it's evident everywhere we look.
And our early Earth was almost perfect. But of course, life is more than just exotic chemistry.
Now, information comes out of nowhere. Coherent, complex information. Actual instructions on how to create life.
You'll be familiar with the double helix of DNA. Each rung contains information. So DNA contains information about how to make living organisms. So the information spreads. Notice that information has become part of our story.
Scientists call DNA the book of life. No book of information ever created itself, ever. It's scientifically impossible without the realm of possibility. Now here's the scary part. This childish stupidity is enthusiastically applauded by people who don't seem to have the ability to think.
I thank you for your attention.
Well, in this type of system, the reason that is applauded and the idea that it's just information just poof and the universe just comes into being, rejecting what is obvious. Now, I know the veto will be, well, you don't understand the position. I think everyone can understand the position quite clearly. You have a TV making itself, only it's more complex. It's living. It can think, see, and reproduce. And no one would see this process as logical. People would laugh at that process of going from the old TV to the modern TV as such. And rightfully so. They should laugh at that because it's clear that a designer had a place in it. In fact, in there, he even said creation, information is created type of thing, which would need or necessitate a creator. Now, so the problem here is irreducible complexity. The law of biogenesis, life always comes from life, and the law of information. Information requires a mind, but it gets worse than that for the position of evolution and atheism, because the two, despite what people will tell you, are directly connected. Atheism is possible by the idea of evolution, and often connected. And people that are Christians that hold to theistic evolution are doing so to try to appease people and fit in, but it doesn't fit into the Bible. But it gets worse than that. Entropy is the enemy of this entire evolutionary fairy tale, which is why they use fairy tale language. Check this out.
This is a scrambled egg going back into its shell. It's an illustration as to how the universe works. No egg ever goes back to being scrambled back into its shell, and so it is with the entire universe. It is slowly degenerating. It's going from order to chaos. We can see that everywhere. But listen closely as this speaker slips in the words general tendency.
The white have separated, and now they're going to be poured back into the egg. And we all know in our heart of hearts that this is not the way the universe works. And we know in our heart of hearts that the universe does not travel from mush to complexity. In fact, this gut instinct is reflected in one of the most fundamental laws of physics, the second law of thermodynamics, or the law of entropy. What that says basically is that the general tendency of the universe is to move from order and structure to lack of order, lack of structure, in fact to mush.
It's not a general tendency, it's an unbending law. Everything is turning to disorder. It's becoming dust, everything, without exception.
And yet, look around us. What we see around us is staggering complexity. So here's a great puzzle. In a universe ruled by the second law of thermodynamics, how is it possible to generate the sort of complexity I've described?
The answer is that it's not possible. It never happens. But listen to his response.
Well, the answer seems to be the universe can create complexity, but with great difficulty. In pockets, there appear what my colleague Fred Spear calls Goldilocks conditions. Not too hot, not too cold, just right for the creation of complexity.
This is a perfect analogy. He cites a fairy tale. He creates pockets where no pockets exist. Again, he's addressing the fact that evolution flies in the face of this unbending law, that everything gets worse, everything runs down, nothing improves. But evolution is supposed to be an exception. With it, things get better, they improve. That's the dilemma. So he uses the childish fairy tale, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, to suspend entropy so that he can fit in his fantasy. Listen to Cornell University address the same dilemma. Someone asked the question, I probably won't get an answer to this one, but entropy says that the universe is breaking down. Evolution says the universe is getting better. Please explain this. The astronomer points to a poker game. The universe dealt us a lucky hand. The porridge was just right. Back to the magical fairy tale.
And slightly more complex things appear. And where you have slightly more complex things, you can get slightly more complex things. And in this way, complexity builds stage by stage. Each stage is magical. We, as extremely complex creatures, desperately need to know this story of how the universe creates complexity despite the second law.
His answer is to do what we'll encourage children to do with fairy tales, to use their imagination.
Use your imagination because it can't happen. It contradicts science. The law of entropy is unbending, and yet we have it creating more and more complexity. And it's interesting, he said, created information and these different levels. That would imply intention. And information always requires a mind, so we have to suspend that. Well, why is this so fervently fought against? And are Christians mad at atheists? Just the opposite. We're not mad at atheists. We're not threatened by this idea. This is not an intellectual position. We want you to understand the gospel. We want to reach people with the truth. And this is better for society. It's better for nations, neighbors, babies. It's better for everyone to know that God has created them and they are accountable to God. So MacArthur said this, not so, religion is exactly the right word to describe natural philosophy is built on a faith-based premise in basic presupposition, a priori rejection of everything supernatural requires a giant leap of faith, and nearly all its supporting theories must be taken by faith as well. So, in other words, why am I saying this is a religion? Because it has blind faith. It is the same conviction and zeal that you would see someone else in another religion. In fact, it's the religion of self. And atheists and people that follow evolution will say, well, they're not connected. The origin of life is not connected to evolutionary processes, but there is inseparably connected. That's the problem. And it's a blind faith that people have that suspends the law of entropy, that suspends the law of abiogenesis, that suspends the idea that nothing can create everything or explode into everything from nothing, that information can become more complex, that design is only apparent because you can't say it's actual information around us. There's no actual information. It's just the appearance of information. You have all these unbending laws, which are scientifically impossible, being suspended because this is a blind faith. But in reality, God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, birds of the air, heavens, and livestock, over all the earth and creeping things that creep on the earth. Romans 1 is probably the most concise view of this. His invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, things that have been made so they are without excuse. So people have no excuse, and atheism and evolutionary ideology is a blind faith. And Jesus mentioned this often in the Bible. People are blind, spiritually blind, professing to be wise. They became fools. They exchanged the glory of God for corruptible things and decided to worship them rather than the Creator. Isn't that what we see in our modern culture? But Jesus Christ, who is fully God and fully man, created you. He made you in his image. You have value, you have worth, you have a purpose, and you're ultimately accountable to God. And what I'm saying to you is not behavior modification. I'm not trying to get you to clean yourself up. I'm trying to get you to surrender, to recognize that you have violated God's law, that you are an enemy of God through wicked works, that you have broken all of these commandments by lying, committing adultery, committing idolatry, coveting, stealing, these types of things, not honoring our parents. We're all guilty before the judgment seat of God. And his judgment is swift, it is permanent, and it is forever in a very sad place called hell. But Jesus Christ fulfilled the law in your place. As the perfect God-man, he fulfilled the requirements of the law, went to the cross, paid an infinite hell that died and rose on the third day. And he's risen, and you must repent of your idolatry and put all of your trust in the death, burial, and resurrection of the God-man, Jesus Christ. So if this makes sense to you, which hopefully it's clear that atheism and evolutionary ideology are not intellectual positions. This is a religion worshipped with high priests, with a process, with sacraments, and with things that are within orthodoxy and outside of orthodoxy, terms, definitions, and the reshaping of things, even to the extent the video I did on kinds, I said we don't recognize kinds. Well, that's fine, but God created kinds, and that's how he describes it in the Bible. And the other ideas that have been created by science are not there. So those are ways to get around what God has clearly created. Evolution is not scientific, and it's not reasonable. It's unreasonable. So I hope this video is helpful. I'm not mad at you. I'm not trying to defend my lack of faith. I understand the reality of things. I understand the positions, and I want you to repent and believe the gospel for your good. So take a moment, if you're still watching this, and hammer that like button. Like the 95 Theses, and subscribe to channel. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here, and God bless.